Face off to the right of Kikkonen. We just talked during this state Wenatchee Wild history about Parker Murray's overtime heroics. Thrown on, they score! Stephen Arp! Drive home safely! We'll see it for Game 6!
Austin Draude, the play-by-play voice and social media man for the Wenatchee Wild. Austin, hello.
Hello. Somebody interviewed me one of my first days out here and said, so this three-dimensional living thing is pretty neat, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is, and I'm going to steal that. And I've used that line ever since. It's a perfect line, and I'm not going back from it.
Right. Yeah, Wenatchee's a lot different than Iowa. I mean, we got like mountains, and we've got foothills to the Cascade Mountains. You like it here, don't you?
I do. The funny thing is, so if you hike up to Saddle Rock or you look up at Saddle Rock is higher than any point in the state that I grew up in.
Wow.
Anywhere.
Wow. Austin Draude, voice of the Wenatchee Wild. I'm just curious. Describe your family. What was it like to grow up in Iowa? Did you have a lot of siblings?
I had one sibling. He's younger than me. He was the only sibling I had. Mom and dad. My dad raised me a huge hockey fan. We went to a few Des Moines Buccaneers USHL games a year, and I've never really looked back from that.
What did you want to be? What did Austin Draude want to be when you were little? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh gosh, what didn't I want to be when I grew up when I was little? But I think this has always been kind of on the radar. I grew up on NHL 99, Triple Play 99, like all the sports video games. And I guess, and I kind of remember it, I would do my own play-by-play for computer game hockey and computer game baseball. And so I really got into those when I was a kid, and took that on to college, and obviously on to small town radio station, and then the North Iowa Bulls in the NA3HL, and the North Iowa Bulls in the NAHL. And now I brought it out here to Wenatchee.
So here's the part. This is Roadmaps, the podcast that explains how people get to where you want to go. Now, I wish I would have seen this. I wish I would have spoken to you, Austin Draude, back when I was in high school and college, because I grew up with a guy named Dave Niehaus. He was a play-by-play guy for the Seattle Mariners, and I really badly wanted to get into sports play-by-play. So what you're doing is kind of like, it is my boyhood dream of being a play-by-play guy. So how did you get your very first radio play-by-play position? Explain how that happened.
Well, the first radio play-by-play that I did was for the student station at the college I went to back in Iowa. My first game was a women's basketball game right before Christmas break, and since it's a small school, they usually play women's games and then men's games. They'll play double headers, and this was one of the rare single games, just a women's game. They had already torn down the gym on our campus, and they were rebuilding it. So we played at one of the old gyms at the university about 20 minutes from where I was going to school. So this is a game, women's basketball only, Division III, off campus, right before Christmas break. You can imagine how packed the house it was.
Wow.
We had 250 people in the stands, and I called my first game that night with a guy who is still one of my great friends in the business. He works for the station, actually in the town where we went to college together. And I kind of knew that was what I wanted to do. It's what I went to school for. But after I called that first game, yeah, I'm hooked. Sign me up for every one of these.
I bet. What college did you go to?
It's called Wartburg College. It's a little school near Waterloo, which is a couple of hours northeast of Des Moines, back in Iowa. Used to be about 1,800 students. I think it's down to about 1,500 now. So it's it's a pretty small school. I think Wenatchee and Eastmont High School are both bigger than the college I went to school at.
Do you still have tape of that very first broadcast you did?
I have no tape of that first one whatsoever. The first hockey game I did, which was 2013, I still have the DVD of that somewhere, and I've never listened to it. I'm afraid to.
Right. Now, so here's the process, because like, you do hockey play-by-play. I do music radio. I'm a radio host. And I remember one of the most scary but yet amazingly constructive moments in my career is sitting in what's called air check sessions and hearing a program director or some kind of mentor listen to your tape and then tell you what you're doing right and then tell you what you need to correct. Do you ever get that kind of feedback from anybody? I mean, early on and even now. Like, let's start with back then. Did you ever have anybody go over how you call games and help you get better?
Back then, I did a little bit. We'd have. I was part of the State Broadcast News Association, even when I was a student. So they'd have their annual convention, their annual get together, and part of the convention was a session where the young broadcasters like me would take their tapes in to have them critiqued, and that was the tape that I would have critiqued. Moving forward as a professional, fortunately, once you've been around a little while, you get a little better at networking. And one of the really good parts about building a good network of broadcasters that you get to know over the years is we all critique each other's stuff. We all say, "Hey, can you listen to my tape and give me some thoughts on it?" So I've listened to tapes of other guys and given them my feedback. They've listened to my tape and given me feedback, and it's really neat to have that kind of network built up where you've got friends in the business who are willing to listen to each other's stuff and help each other out, help give each other a leg up and advice on how we can each do our jobs a little better.
So how did you land that job? Talk to me. What was the process like? Did you send a tape to somebody from the organization? How does that work? How does somebody get into getting their first hockey job for a team like the North Iowa Bulls in the North American Hockey League?
So here's the crazy part. The small town station that I was working at back in Iowa, we did everything. We did high school sports, and we did football, we did volleyball, we did reports on track and field during the spring, basketball. I attempted to do wrestling poorly, which is really sad considering Iowa is like the cradle of wrestling in this country. And the school that I went to college at was a perennial, like we won national championships in wrestling every year. But we did everything, baseball and softball during the summer. But the one sport we didn't do was hockey. We'd have, every so often, we'd have a couple of kids from the local high school who would play for the club team up the road, but kind of a co-op program. But hockey was not something that in our little town there's a lot of interest in. So being only a half hour from Mason City where the Bulls played, I sent an email to their head coach and their GM to say, we're at the end of our season, and I kind of want to see what I've got as far as hockey goes. Would you mind if I strapped a tape recorder to myself, came up and went to a couple of the games at the end of the year, sat in the press box, and figure out what I've got to work with? And this is a Friday-Saturday home series. And I got an email back from him the same day, within 6 hours. And he said, sounds great. Our normal guy is going to be gone on Saturday night. He's going to be away at a wedding. Would you mind doing the game for real on Saturday night?
Wow.
So Friday night was my audition, and Friday night was my practice game, and I only did 2 periods of it because I went on at the start of the third period with the guy who was calling the game that I was stepping in for. and he kind of introduced me to the fans watching at the start of the third period. And he said, I'm going to step away and let Austin take over from here. And he put his headset down and walked away.
Wow. What did that feel like?
Kind of like getting the training wheels just completely pulled off your bike.
Sure. What year was this? What year did this take place when the guy walked away and you're up there doing your first bit of play-by-play hockey? Was this 2013?
This is 2013, yeah. This is the last game of the 2012-2013 regular season. I did my first game the next week, or the first game the next night, and they won 14-1. So the first game was a challenge for me, but definitely not a challenge for the team I was calling a game for.
When did you become the main voice of the North Iowa Bulls?
So actually, it was that fall. I got a phone call from the guy who was working in the front office. And he called me. It was right after a football game. We were doing a makeup game from the previous Friday. They'd had a lot of lightning storms and everything, so some of the games got postponed. And so we ended up picking up a game on short notice on a Monday night up in Mason City. So I'm up there calling the football game with a friend of mine, and figure I'll grab a bite to eat on the way home. And while I'm out getting the bite to eat, I got a phone call that said, hey, so I'm not sure if you're interested, but the guy who was calling the games last couple of seasons is not available this year, so they are yours if you want them. And so I did about a half to 2/3 of a home schedule. We only did home games, and was only on a video stream. But I did probably 2/3 of the home games, and then the nights that we had conflicts, because I was still working primarily for the radio station, we'd have somebody else come in and fill in for me. But that was the start of being the primary voice for the Bulls, and it lasted for 9 years.
So from 2013 all the way to like 2022, 9 years, you're the voice of the North Iowa Bulls, NAHL. What was your roadmap to get here to Wenatchee? Like, okay, so we've had Chris Hansen. He's been our voice. He would do play-by-play up there in the Crow's Nest at the Town Toyota Center live, and then he would like call the games on hockey TV as he saw it in an empty room. Then Arch Ecker took over, and he rode the bus, and he did home games, away games. We've had some gracious people who filled in the gaps remotely watching hockey TV, and then you show up. When Arch passed away, how did you find out about the opening, and then how did you land the job?
So I'm working for the North Iowa Bulls at the time. We're starting off our season right about the time Arch passed, and we had a Tier 3 team in town, like a level below the Bulls, the level the Bulls had played at before we made some moves with a team that our ownership owned down in Amarillo, Texas. They moved that team up to Mason City, but they kept the old team in town and rebranded them so there wouldn't be any confusion. So I'm working basically overseeing both teams at the time. The end of September rolls around. I'd been looking for something for a couple of months, pretty strongly. And one of the groups that I'm hooked up with is a sportscaster's talent agency. They provide job leads and advice. And one of the job leads they sent out on the last day of September. So this is right before we have a road game in Austin, Minnesota that night. And I get the job lead for the Wenatchee Wild. I knew of the history in Wenatchee. I knew this had been one of the top markets in the North American League for a number of years, and I knew that they'd gone on to the BCHL from there. I hadn't really followed them closely since then, but I knew of the town. I knew of the market, and I didn't know Bliss personally, but I knew the name, I knew the reputation, and I knew he'd had success everywhere he's gone.
It's true.
I thought this is a good opportunity. Everything I'd heard about the organization, the ownership was good, and I said this is basically the best possible opportunity at the worst possible timing.
Right.
So
Right.
I said, so I thought, okay, I'll work my way through the weekend. Monday morning comes around. You know, a lot of these jobs, they get snapped up in a hurry. If you're not one of the first people in when that job lead comes across, you've missed your chance. I'll put in for it first thing Monday morning and, let things fall where they may. Whatever happens, happens. I sent my stuff in on Monday. I'm writing out the cover letter, getting the resume polished up. And just as I get to the end of the cover letter, my last paragraph starts with, such and such is a person I think you should talk to. Not somebody on my reference list, but somebody extra who I think would be another good reference for that particular job. The first person that I thought of was Sean Ziers, who was the one calling the games remotely after Arch had his accident, was out of the lineup, and after Arch had passed. Sean is somebody that I got to know remotely, kind of networked with through the years after he got a job that I had been in the running for in Topeka, Kansas, with a team that's no longer around. So I got a hold of him and I said, "Hey, are you? I'm sure you saw the job lead in Wenatchee. I'm sure you're applying for it." He goes, "I'm not." And I said, "Okay, why not?" I've got a wife who's about ready to get another job here in Illinois where they're living. He said, "I'm close to possibly getting another job. I've got kids that are going through school." He said, "It's not the right time for me to be uprooting everybody and moving everybody out to halfway across the country.
Right.
It's just not the right timing. It's not going to work." And I said, "I am putting in for it. Would you be willing to make a phone call for me?" He goes, "Absolutely."
Yeah, that's huge. That was huge because he was our guy for a little bit. Yeah.
It was huge. And I knew that phone call, I knew that email, whatever he sent would have a lot of weight. I put in for it right after that. And I know I think he sent an email out to Bliss. And I got an email back on Tuesday morning, first thing Tuesday morning, to say, "Do you have some time to talk on Wednesday or Thursday?" Thursday, we were going to be on a bus to Aberdeen, South Dakota for a road trip. So I thought, let's do this on Wednesday. Thursday is really not going to be a good day for this. We did the interview on Wednesday morning, and this is first thing in the morning out here. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning back home, so it's fairly early in the day. We do the interview, and I called my folks right after the interview, and I said, I thought it went really well. I've got a really good feeling about this one. And I'm on the phone with my dad over the lunch hour telling him the same thing. And the phone rings while I'm on the phone with him. And the call waiting to come in is Bliss.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Hey, do you mind hanging on a sec? I need to take this." And so basically, I went from the interview, like starting the interview, to ending the job search and getting the offer within less than the time it takes to play a BCHL hockey game. Like 2.5 hours or less. I went from ending the interview to ending the job search like that.
Wow. So he gave you the job. He announced it. Said, "Congratulations. You're our new play-by-play guy for the Wenatchee Wild."
So when I hung up the phone with Bliss and I got back on the phone with my dad, I told him, "Hey, sorry about that. I just got a call from Bliss, my new boss."
It's so awesome. Congratulations, buddy. That's huge. I love that story. I've never heard you tell that story before. What would you say, Austin Draude, the play-by-play voice of our Wenatchee Wild, the team of the Western Hockey League? What would you say to anyone listening or watching this who would want to follow in your footsteps and be a play-by-play announcer and make it a living? What's the advice you would give?
I would say, number one, be willing to send it. Step out and send that email that I got started in. That's the email that got me started 10 years ago with North Iowa. Was a simple, hey, can I kind of figure out what I've got to work with sort of email. But I think the bigger one is, I've told people this before, don't put limits on what you're willing to learn or where you're willing to let that take you. And here's why I say that. When I started out in college, my freshman year, I was actually on the newspaper staff before I ever called a game for the campus radio station. Coming in as a freshman, like every freshman, every kid on the newspaper staff who's doing sports, during the fall, we had football, and we had a really good football team every year. So every kid wants the big football photo and the big byline, and that one went to one of the seniors. That one went to whoever the sports editor was that year. But they said, we can put you on the volleyball beat. Volleyball is a sport that up until that year, I had watched a full match enough times to count on one hand. But I said, okay, I'll do it. Covering the volleyball team that year, I learned enough about the sport, and I went back and helped do it again the following year. I learned enough about the sport to start calling it on the radio sophomore year. Junior year, we did all of the conference matches at home. And then senior year, we did all the conference matches home and away. And I did the majority of them. One of those volleyball tapes was the one that got me my initial job at my first radio station. Volleyball is it's a tough sport to do on the radio. The pace is quick. That tape got me my first job there. Without that job, without being in that place at that time, I couldn't have gotten the job with the North Iowa Bulls. Without the job with the North Iowa Bulls, I'm not in the Western Hockey League. Don't say no to the opportunity to learn about something and grow in it and try it, because you have no idea where you can go with it, where it might take you.
Yeah, find your opportunity, and once you get your foot in the door, you work your tail off, and that's what you've done. And I want to thank you for being one of our first guests on Roadmaps, the podcast, the YouTube channel that helps explain how you can get there. Austin, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.